get started, if we will, please. We are in James chapter 2, beginning James chapter 2, verses 1 through 13 is our text for this morning. James chapter 2, verses 1 through 13. I read the text. My brethren, do not hold the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. For if there should come into your assembly a man with gold rings and fine apparel, there should also come in a poor man in filthy clothes. And you pay attention to the one wearing the fine clothes. Say to him, you sit here in a good place, and say to the poor man, you stand there, or sit here by my footstool. Have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brethren. Has God not chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Do not the rich oppress you and drag you into the courts? Do they not blaspheme that noble name by which you were called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. But if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not murder. Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so do as those who will be judged by the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. The church has gathered to worship God. And just before, a few moments before worship began, a visitor walks in. His clothes are dirty and well worn. He's obviously poor. And disdain is reflected upon the faces of some. And the stranger asks, where can I sit? And he is shown a pew in the back, hidden in the corner. No sooner is this stranger seated than in walks another visitor. He's obviously well off, as is demonstrated by his well-tailored suit and his jewelry. He is greeted warmly with hearty handshakes and words of welcome. An influential member of the church approaches him and invites him to sit with him and his family, to join them for lunch afterwards. After services, the poor man is conveniently overlooked, while the rich man heads out to lunch with the members of the church. Now, that is trying to take what we just read in James and put it into a scenario that we might understand. And it's bringing it home. And let me hasten to say that I have seen, it has been my experience mostly, that those who come into the presence of God's people to worship, who may not come from money and obviously come from less fortunate circumstances, that they are typically warmly welcomed. That has been my observation. However, it's easy, isn't it, for us to extend ourselves to someone superficially. Welcome, glad you're here, and then go on our way. Are we more inclined to be warmer, to be more welcoming to those who might be of means than we would be to the one who needs us? Sometimes people ask me, why do you travel to India or Guyana or Panama or Poland? Why do you travel to these places where you've done mission work when there's people across the street? There's people right here where you are who need to hear the gospel. And the answer is pretty simple for me. People in America, for the most part, are very self-sufficient. Those that we consider poor in America would be considered rich in places in India where I go. And here in America, we'll have a gospel meeting and we'll send out an invitation, maybe mail out, do some advertising. And we're excited if we get 2, 3, 4, 5 visitors from the community. And I think one is worth being excited over. When I go to India, people don't have anything. They don't have a car to drive, so they walk miles through 100, 105, 110 degree heat with no water, no stores along the way for convenience. And they'll walk or ride a bicycle for as long as it takes to be able to hear the gospel. And for the most part, they're not sitting on padded pews and an air-conditioned auditorium. Usually the buildings, if there is a building, is a concrete wall, either dirt floor or concrete floor. They'll sit on those. They'll sit on the floor. Or sometimes in the nicer buildings, they'll have plastic chairs. The kids will sit on the floor and the adults might get to sit on a plastic chair. Hard plastic. No air conditioner. And they will be there sometimes an hour or 2 hours before we arrive singing praises. They will sit on the floor for 2 hours and listen, and then they will beg for more. That's why. That's why my heart is in India. That's why I love to go to India and preach the gospel. And when we read this in James, it is how we treat others. But I'd also like for us to think about how it applies to us personally beyond how we treat others. Because there is the mindset here in this text of treating those who have better than those who have not. And I think it is human nature for us to do that. And I think we need to be very careful that we don't do that. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll look at someone and we will measure them. And we'll say, well, I think this person is A, B, C, or D. I think this person is A, looking for a handout. B, here to worship but probably won't commit. C, seems to be pretty sincere. D, has some money. It sure would look good in our coffers. Wonder if we can get them to stay. And we go down the list, don't we? That's typically how people look at people. We are called by Christ to go beyond that, to not be of that mindset. And this is a very hard reminder. There's nothing soft about the way James says this, right? And so it can be convicting. And I find it convicting to myself. That sometimes I catch myself categorizing people like that. How do I know that happens? Because I've done it. And that's not the mind that Christ wants me to have. And I think also as we think about this and we think in terms of the blessings that we have and what we do with them and how we look at others, we need to also look at how we see ourselves. I think sometimes one of the curses of the church, if you will, one of the hardest things that we have to deal with spiritually is the fact that we have so much. We've been so blessed. Because it makes us comfortable, and when I get comfortable, I get apathetic, right? And I need to be made uncomfortable to be stirred. I need to get out of my comfort zone. So we get used to our comfort, right? I mean, if the temperature is 1 degree higher or lower, whoever's in control of the thermostat is going to hear about it. Right? And they're going to hear about it anyway because when you're cold, I'm hot. Or when you're cold, I'm comfortable. And when I'm comfortable, you're cold or hot. And because we're different, right? And we've gotten so accustomed to our comfort. We've gotten so accustomed to be able to go home, sit in our recliner, put the air conditioner just exactly where we want it, have our ice cold water or coffee or soda or sweet tea, whatever it is. And that's normal. We don't think anything about it. We feel like we deserve it. We feel like we've earned it and we deserve it. And that, I believe, has worked its way into the mindset of the church in America. And it's traveling abroad. It's seeing the things that I've seen and experienced with churches and where people are truly living in destitution. That has shown that to me. And I don't say that to be condemning. I say it simply because it's an observation, and we need to be reminded of that. We need to be reminded. I like being spoiled. Don't get me wrong. I like being comfortable. I like being spoiled. Okay? I like having things the way I like them just as much as anyone else. But I need to be aware of the dangers that can present to me. And especially spiritually. We are called as children of God to sacrifice. And we are called to be partakers of the sufferings of Christ. And we don't like to be made uncomfortable. Physically, mentally, we don't like to hear things. You probably something don't like to hear what I'm saying right now. We don't like to hear things that make us uncomfortable. Right? And so we've got social media. Here's what we do. We've got Facebook, right? And so we get on Facebook and we get a friend request. And we look at that person's profile and say, that person thinks like I do. That person has the same political persuasion, same kind of belief system, whatever. Yeah, I'll be a friend with that person. So say something, do something, and somebody says something we don't like. What do? Well, I'll just unfollow you. I don't have to put up with this. I might just unfriend you. As a matter of fact, I just might block you. And with a click of a button, we control our circles. We control who we see, what affects us, and what we end up with is establishing a system of false affirmation. Now that I've gotten my friends list like I want it, and I've got the right people in there, and these people think like I do, I can say things, and guess what? Those people are going to see it, and they're going to like it, because all it takes is a click of a button for them to like it. They don't really have to invest anything into it. They can like it and forget about it and move on, but what does that do to me? I look at that and I say, look at there. I've gotten 110 likes. Boy, I feel good about myself. And it's false affirmation. But that's the world that we live in, and we let that affect our thinking. And so we don't like it then when we're made uncomfortable. We don't like it when something doesn't go our way. And it's okay to not like it. So now that I chased that rabbit, let's take it back to the man who has come into our presence. And it's kind of along the same lines, though, isn't it? Here's one that makes me feel comfortable. Here's one that I don't know what to do with, and I'm uncomfortable with that. Here's one that I feel like it's safe to establish a relationship with. Here's one that if I start to establish a relationship, they might ask more of me. It might take more than something, a superficial handshake or welcome or whatever. And it's surely if I were to take them out to lunch, then it's going to start something. And I just don't think I just don't need that. I mean, I've got my friends. Am I that far off? You think? Isn't that how we think? But what if instead I developed the capacity, or at least tried, to see other people as Christ sees them, and to treat them as He would treat them? So we sing the song, Footsteps of Jesus. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. Will we? Really? You ever notice where the footsteps of Jesus go? The footsteps of Jesus took him to the lepers who were untouchable, and he touched them. If you were a leper, it was required of you that if you met someone coming down the road, that you let them know that you were unclean, and you holler, unclean, unclean, and you move to the other side of the road and let them pass. Can you imagine living like that? So imagine, if you would, Jesus is walking down the road, a leper is coming toward him, and he hollers out, unclean, unclean, and he moves over to the other side of the road, and Jesus says, hold up there, wait a minute, and he walks over to the other side of the road, and he walks up to the leper. No one does that. He touches him, and no one surely does that, and he heals him. Now, you and I don't have the capacity to touch a leper and heal them, but we do have the capacity to touch people in their lives and bring healing in their lives where everyone else is ignoring them or misusing them. Don't we? We have that capacity. You see, God did not bless me as He has blessed me so that I can build a palace and live in luxury. I haven't been blessed that much anyway, but if He did, if I could. And the truth of the matter is, I'm pretty sure I'm talking to everybody in here. You're rich. You are wealthy. If you don't believe me, follow me to India. Let me show you a few things. I think I shared with you the occasion where the rickshaw driver saw me coming, and he stopped his rickshaw. That is a bicycle with seats on the back. If you've watched Indiana Jones, you've seen that, right? So that is a bicycle with a seat on the back, and he pedals the bicycle while his passengers, one or two, sit back there and let him do all the work. He probably would not make $1 a day doing that in 100, 105, 110 degree or hotter temperature. And he sees me coming, and he gets off his rickshaw, and he walks up to me. And I'm watching him thinking, what's he going to do? What's going on here? And he walks up to me, and he bends down, he kneels down in front of me and starts to kiss my feet. And I stopped him, and I lifted him up. No. Now, he couldn't speak English. I reached in my pocket. And I'm not bragging. Please understand, I'm not bragging about this. Because to me, it was very little. I got a few hundred rupees, probably about $20 worth. You and I will spend that on spend more than that on the steak dinner, right? When we go out for a special occasion, want to eat nice. And I gave it to him. And it wasn't until, and of course he thank me in his language over and over again. And it wasn't until he left that I thought about the fact that that's more money than that man would see. He would have to work probably for a month driving that rickshaw every day. And on the way into town, I had passed by, across the river, this muddy river, there was like a little gathering of tents. It was sticks with clothes and cloth placed over them for shade. That was where the rickshaw drivers lived. That's what he lived in. What I did was nothing, absolutely nothing. It wasn't even a sacrifice. It was hardly even an inconvenience. But I share that with you to remind us of something. We need, first of all, to be honest with ourselves and realize that this is the case, that this is true. And I think that when I say it's true, I'm saying it's true of me. You have to decide whether or not it's true of you. But for me, I look at this and I find myself guilty. And then we need to pray that God will help us have the heart to see people as Jesus sees them. To see a moment not as an inconvenience, but as an opportunity. To see that person in a Walmart parking lot standing on the corner where people come and go with the sign, not as someone wondering if we should call the cops on them because they're a bother to people. But as a soul and as an opportunity. To see that waitress who's not doing her job very well, and who's not the friendliest person in the world, and who has let my coffee get cold twice. And look at her and wonder where she is in life. What a word of encouragement might do for her. What an extra tip might do for her. And see her as an opportunity. Not because she deserves it. See, it's not about what she deserves. It's not about her, really, at all. It's about me. And it took me a while to figure that out. But this opportunity is not about that person, and it's not about whether they deserve it or whether they're going to abuse my generosity, or whether they're going to be grateful or ungrateful. But that it's an opportunity that I have to show the love of God to someone. And it's not about that person at that point. It's about me. It's about my heart. It's about who I am. Stacy and I were eating. And that waitress, she was mid-50s, I guess. Not only was she not friendly, she was rude. And she was not good at what she did. Poor service. She took our order, may have checked on us once, and then brought our ticket. I'm sitting there with my glass empty and my ice is melting. I pulled out $25 and put it on the table. I looked at Stacy and I said, "Did you notice something? You know, at her age, why is she doing this?" I'm pretty sure serving tables was not what was on her list when her kindergarten teacher said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I noticed that she didn't have on a wedding ring. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, but she's probably single, most likely a mother, has raised children. Maybe she raised them as a single mother. Maybe she's trying to support grandchildren. I don't know. All I know is she doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be doing this. And I don't blame her, but she is. And I have an opportunity to do something. It's little, not that much, but it's something. But it's not about her. It's not. It's about me. I think there's more here that James is trying to tell us than make sure you greet the visitors. And it's when you have the opportunity to show compassion on those less fortunate, that moment portrays who you are. I guess the question then at that point is, who do I want that to be? Usually when we talk about this passage, we talk about partiality. And yes, James is dealing with partiality here. He's making a contrast between how people treat those less fortunate and how they treat those who are more fortunate. Usually what that translates into is, how do I treat someone who only wants something from me, and how do I treat someone that I might be able to get something from? Right? Not necessarily money, but something. Accolades, feeling of importance, you name it. Now think about it. Let's go back to social media. Social media kind of gives us a window to people, although it's usually not a very accurate window. It tells us something about people. How many times have you seen someone take a selfie with a poor man on the street and say, "Hey, look who I met today"? But they'll take a selfie with a country singer or rock star, won't they? They go to the concert or see them in a store. "Look who I saw today." Why? Why do we do that? Does that somehow give me importance? So we all, yours truly included, are guilty of showing partiality. We need to understand that. We need to be able to recognize that in ourselves and then start to work on that. Now remember this. Just remember that moment, that opportunity, does more to define me than it does the person I'm interacting with. So I need to ask myself the question is, who do I want that to be? Who do I want to be in that moment? This is more important, who do I want God to see? I'm pretty sure that on the day of judgment, I'm pretty sure a picture of me with some politician or musician isn't going to be displayed to my favor on the day of judgment as a determining factor of my life. But that moment that I showed God to someone who couldn't see him, that moment that the love of God shone through me when I took someone in an unfortunate circumstance and did what I could at that moment to help them, to show them love, to show them that they matter. And I do think God's going to notice that. Pretty sure he is. So when I get that, then what James is dealing with here, the showing of partiality and the welcoming into our assembly, the rich versus the poor, the well-dressed versus the not so well-dressed, whatever, that's going to take care of itself, isn't it? I mean, that's really just a symptom. And so, he says, verse 4, have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become, catch this, become judges with evil thoughts? What does James point to? He points to who I am at the moment. Here's the moment, and here is who you have become. And it's shown in this moment. He goes on to say how that, God chose the poor of the world to be rich and heirs of the kingdom. And the rich and powerful are those who have become enemies of Christ quite often. Let's be careful here. Here's where I've seen preachers and others react to an extreme with an extreme here. They go from, well, we need to take care of the poor to casting aspersions on people because they're rich. And we live in a society, especially in the political realm, where we are taught by our society to envy those and to have jealousy and resentment to those who have wealth. That doesn't belong in the heart of a child of God either. I know some very wealthy people who are some of the most generous people that I've ever seen. Whenever Jesus pointed to the widow and her 2 mites, he says she gave all that she had. It doesn't matter whether I have a penny, $1, or $1 million. Who I am is only going to be reflected in what I do with that which God has given me.